Welcome to Patscast. I'm Brad Whitaker. The Denver Broncos have officially released Russell Wilson, and he will enter NFL free agency, being able to pick wherever he wants to go after the period begins on March 13th. And this really is an unprecedented move because he's still owed a ton of money by the Denver Broncos. They're going to be taking on an $85 million dead cap hit after 2 seasons. And that, I believe, is double the greatest amount a team has ever taken on. But that's how badly they want to move on from him. And head coach Sean Payton wants to move on from him. And look, the New England Patriots, they have to, at the very least, be in the conversation of considering signing him to a 1-year deal, a prove it, perhaps veteran minimum deal to come in, be the bridge quarterback to whomever the rookie is, and kind of mentor them, but also be able to play at a high level for at least a season. Because if that guy is Jacoby Brissett, if that guy is Jimmy Garoppolo, even if it's Joe Flacco, who I like the most out of that bunch, there's no guarantees that's going to work out. And the odds makers, at least according to DraftKings, give the Patriots, they're in the 4th position to land Russell Wilson. The leading favorite, the presumed favorite, is the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 1, then the Las Vegas Raiders at number 2, then the Atlanta Falcons at number 3, although I would expect that to drop because of the PFT report that basically said Kirk Cousins is preparing for a move to Atlanta. So there's a really good chance that Kirk Cousins is going to be the next QB for the Falcons. And then the Patriots come in at 4th. So really just the Steelers and the Raiders are the teams that would likely be most interested in bringing in a guy like Russell Wilson. Now, to all those saying Russell Wilson is washed up and he's not the quarterback he once was, I get it, right? Like, I totally get it. There's a lot of red flags. He's a bit of an aloof individual, kind of a cheesy guy. I'm not sure he's the best teammate. Like, it's not like he doesn't work hard and he's not there early and staying late and understanding the playbook. It's just he's not the kind of guy that's going to pick everybody up, you know? I think he thinks of himself very much as an individual. But this is also a team that brought in Cam Newton, and he had that reputation as well and really took on the leadership role during his time in New England. Actually played much better than I think most of us expected he would, certainly before COVID, when he went down for a game and wasn't able to play, and then came back and wasn't really the same player, and he really picked it up again toward the end of the COVID season there. Russell Wilson, if you look at his statistics, for all the narrative that he is washed up, he's not a great team player, his stats really have not dropped off a table since Seattle, like everybody says it had. And, you know, the first season in Denver wasn't great, for sure, but he did have more passing yards than he did the previous season in Seattle when he made the Pro Bowl. And he had more touchdowns this past season than he did his last year in Seattle when he made the Pro Bowl, and just 2 more interceptions. So, look, these numbers are here. He had a 66% completion percentage. I believe that was the 2nd best of his entire career. Or no, it was his 3rd best of his entire career, counting all the years in Seattle. You know, he's not the fastest anymore, but he can still be mobile. He can move out of the pocket. I think the real issue with him is he going to stand in the pocket, go through the progression, do all those things you ask a quarterback to do at the NFL level? Because sometimes, and look, we've talked about this with Jaden Daniels, we've talked about this with plenty of mobile quarterbacks in the past. They take one read, they bail on the play and try to make a play with their legs or extend it with their legs and then throw to a guy that they shouldn't have been throwing to in the first place. Russell Wilson does have that problem a little bit, but he's not going to be running the Patriots of old Earhart Perkins offense that Tom Brady and Mac Jones essentially and Cam Newton ran for 20 plus years. That will not be what's run. Now that Alex Van Pelt is there, they will be running a more simplified hybrid approach, new school, old school, whichever way you want to slice it, West Coast style offense, which will be much easier for not just a rookie quarterback coming in to pick up, but a lot easier for a guy like Russell Wilson to pick up. Being with a new team, he's not going to have to deal with those complexities that the Patriots and Tom Brady dealt with. I mean, you heard Tom Brady talk about I think in interviews, or I think it was Brian Hoyer. He was in a podcast with Tommy Curran, and he said we would have 3 plays called at the same time in the Super Bowl against the Eagles because we just knew whatever defensive package we were seeing, we could adjust the play on a fly at the line. The Patriots offense will never be that complex again, right? Like, it's going to be much more simplified, going to be a lot more zone running, which they've certainly picked up over the last couple of years, a lot more bootlegs, a lot more play actions. And that is really the trajectory that the NFL is moving in. And I think Russell Wilson would be able to pick that up right away. And I'm not saying this is what they should do, right? Look, I think in all likelihood they're going to take Drake May or Jane Daniels at 3 overall. Or maybe they draft Marvin Harrison and take one of the second-tier quarterbacks. Or they trade back and take, J.J. McCarthy in the middle of the first round or something and then draft a tackle or receiver somewhere in the first or second round with an additional pick. There's a lot that they can do, but they have to at least consider this bridge guy for at least one season, probably only one season, especially if it's Jane Daniels or Drake May, who I think would be ready by year 2. And I think Russell Wilson, now that he is in the conversation, look, I get the Joe Flacco thing. Like, he's the guy I would consider Joe Flacco maybe even over Russell Wilson just because of how well he played, specifically with Alex Van Pelt this last year in Cleveland. But you can't deny that Russell Wilson doesn't still have talent, right? If you look at his statistics, ignore the narrative. I know there's issues with dealing with Sean Payton, but this is not Sean Payton. Sean Payton is much more of a Belichickian type coach than a Gerard Mayo type coach. I think they're going to get along a little bit better, and I think he's going to be able to fit better into a simplified West Coast style offense in New England if that is indeed the route they decide to go, and picking Russell Wilson for a year. And here's the thing. Wilson is probably willing to sign for the veteran minimum just because he is being paid a huge contract still by the Denver Broncos. So probably the best thing he can do, whether he goes to New England, whether he goes to Vegas or Pittsburgh or Atlanta, is to take a cheap veteran minimum for 1 year, give his team all the salary cap space they need so they can provide the weapons around him that he needs to succeed. And then he goes somewhere else, proves it in that year, and then leaves that destination and signs a longer term, 2 to 3 year lucrative contract with another team. And New England really fits that mold probably better than Pittsburgh or Las Vegas or Atlanta, who are looking for someone a little bit more long term. Now, maybe that is attractive to him, right? He wants to sign kind of a lengthier contract, but because of his reputation coming out right now, coming out of Denver, he's probably not going to get paid what he could if he took the veteran minimum for 1 year, played very well, played almost at a Pro Bowl caliber level, which, I mean, he's made what? He's made 9 Pro Bowls in his career, made it every year in Seattle except for one, finished as high as 3rd in offensive player of the year rankings. And he did that as early as 2019. So, I mean, there's still something in the tank there with Russell Wilson. And look, you're never going to get a Super Bowl caliber quarterback as a bridge guy, but this is probably as close as you can get. And I think he has a real shot at being a comeback player of the year type guy, put in the right situation, which I think New England might be, assuming they can get the tackle position right, bring back Michael Onwenu, maybe sign Tyron Smith, which it sounds like they're going to go after him, add another receiver weapon, whether it's in the draft or if they can go after Calvin Ridley, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but if you can get him for $15 million, I think that's a good deal. Working with Douglas, bringing back Kendrick Bourne, he would have something there that I think would work, and he'd be able to extend plays with his legs better than certainly Joe Flacco, or maybe even Jacoby Brissett, who I know is a bit more mobile, but he's also more of a tank. I think Russell Wilson probably would be a little bit more elusive in the pocket than a guy like Brissett. Now, look, this feels like a move that Bill Belichick would have made, right? Like, if Bill Belichick were still the head coach and GM of the Patriots, I think he would make this move instantly. March 13th, he would sign Russell Wilson as a bridge quarterback and then draft Jaden Daniels in the first round. And just because we have Elliott Wolf at the helm now, with the assistance of Gerard Mayo, doesn't mean they're not still going to embrace some of that Bill Belichick philosophy. And what made Belichick great as a head coach and a GM, which kind of slipped toward the end of his career, is he knew guys that were undervalued. He didn't overpay for people, which I think the Patriots are going to have to do because they're not an attractive free agent destination anymore. They're going to have to overpay if they want to bring in a Calvin Ridley or a Tyron Smith. But especially with Mike Evans getting $26 million a year, my goodness. But getting a guy who's undervalued with a one-year deal who has something to prove. I mean, it worked with Darrelle Revis. Remember, Darrelle Revis was kind of considered like, he's on, the last 2 or 3 holes of his career. Didn't play quite as well his last season with the Jets before he went to New England. Then he came to the Patriots and was Darrelle Revis again, and then went back to the Jets on a very lucrative contract. Like, I think something like that could work out really well for Russell Wilson. Bill Belichick tried it with Cam Newton. Obviously not as big of a success story as Darrelle Revis, certainly. But I think you're going to get a lot more out of a guy like Russell Wilson for a year than you did for Cam Newton for a year. And then whether it's Drake May or Jaden Daniels or somebody else, but particularly Drake May or Jaden Daniels, who are the type of quarterbacks who can really sling it, who are accurate, but also have the ability to be mobile, particularly Daniels, but don't count out May. He can move with his legs. He can extend plays. He's much more of a bulldozer like Josh Allen. Having a guy like Russell Wilson to learn under, even if he's not the best mentor in the world, just being able to see an experienced veteran with his skill set at an NFL level, I think 1 year on the bench watching that, or maybe Wilson washes out like people think he does, and you have the next quarterback take over in November. Like, it's not the worst idea, and if you can get him for cheap for the veteran minimum, I think the Patriots at least really have to strongly consider this. I still like Flacco, don't get me wrong, but if you have Drake May or Jaden Daniels on the bench, it's not the same prototype as Russell Wilson, right? Like, Joe Flacco is not that prototype. Russell Wilson, even though he's much smaller than Daniels or May, will fit that mold a lot more and allow them to really come into their own, particularly if they take over in their second year as the future Patriots starting quarterback. But let me know what you think. This is a hotly contested topic in Patriots Nation right now. I'd say the vast majority of people have kind of written off Russell Wilson. They've fallen into the narrative that didn't work out. They think Sean Payton is a great coach, and if you can't work with Payton, you can't work with anybody else. Like, I get it. I get the red flags, but you're never going to get a perfect bridge guy, and I think this is as close as you're going to get to a guy who's going to be able to contribute and maybe even bring the Patriots back to a borderline playoff team in 1 year, particularly if they put the right weapons and offensive line in front of him. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Share it with your friends, and we'll be back with more Pats Cast tomorrow. Patriots Nation, let's ride.